Okay. So welcome everybody to this part of the camp, to this formation about architecture held by Emanuele. So first of all, we can start with a very short presentation about us, maybe only our name and the community, our community, or else the place where we live. And then we can start with the formation, okay? So, hi everybody, I'm Maria Velia, and I'm part of the community of Bologna in the northern Italy. And I am the technical assistant. So if you have any problem, you can contact me or write me. Okay.
If you have the list, maybe it's better to call the people.
Okay, I will call them. Daniele Resca.
Hi, I'm Daniele. I'm part of community of Ravenna, but I live in a small village near Bologna.
Okay, welcome Daniele. Elisa.
Hi, I'm Anita. I belong to the community in Galatina. Welcome everybody.
Welcome Elisa. Then we have Simone.
Hi everybody, I am too from the community of Galatina.
Okay, then we have Francesca.
Oh, hi everybody, I'm Francesca and I belong to community of Milan.
Okay, welcome. Then we have Eugenia.
Hi everyone, I'm Eugenia. I belong to the community of Malta. I'm originally from Germany and that's where I am now because I flew back home to be with family during COVID.
Ah, nice. Welcome Eugenia.
Thank you.
Ryan, then Ryan.
Hello, I'm Ryan. I'm from the community in Malta. So.
Okay, welcome. Then we have Martino.
Hi everybody, I'm Martino from community of Trieste, northern Italy. Hi.
Welcome Martino. Then we have Reka.
Hi, my name is Reka and I'm from Hungary and the city Pécs.
Okay, thank you. Then we have, I think, Enza. Yes.
I'm Enza. I'm from community Matera.
Okay, welcome Enza. Then we have Mariella.
Hello, I am Mariella and I'm from Milan.
Welcome Mariella. Then we have Clelia and Michela.
Hi, I'm Clelia and I'm from the community of Pisa, but I'm from Calabria.
Hi, I'm Michela. I'm from the community of Pisa too, and I am from Matera.
Okay, welcome. Then we have Anya.
Hello, I'm Anya from Ljubljana. It's very close to Trieste. I would love to be at Malta right now. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Anya. Welcome. Then we have Laura.
Hi, I have a problem with connection. I prefer to stay without webcam.
Yes.
I'm Laura from Trento.
Okay.
Adult. Okay.
Okay, welcome Laura. Welcome. Then we have Katia.
Hi, I'm Katia. I'm from Slovenia.
Okay, welcome. Then we have Rocky. I think it's Laura. Correct? The Rocky.
Yes, is another.
Okay.
Is another Laura from Trento. Rocky is the name from her husband, but
okay.
I don't know. I can write to her. I don't Okay. Laura. I don't have answer. I don't have.
I cannot hear you. Sorry.
I have written to her, but
Okay.
I don't know.
Sì, lo so.
Sì, ti ci sta cercando? Laura? Oh, you can help.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. But she's Laura too.
She can answer. I don't know. No. She can't write. She can't speak. I don't know why.
Okay, but she's with us and she's Laura too.
Sta dicendo che sei con noi comunque, eccetera. Non so come fare ad aiutarti, Laura. Anche Francesco ha problemi. Boh, vabbè. Proviamo. Adesso aspetta che stacco il microfono e vediamo, sento. Ok, ciao.
Okay, we can go on. Then we have Urska.
Hello, I am Urska from Slovenia, from Ljubljana. And I am also having a little technical problems with camera, so can I be without?
Okay, yes, of course you can. Of course.
I will later. Thank you.
Okay, welcome. And finally, we have Francesco. Francesco, that maybe is the husband of Laura, or not?
No, it's not my husband. He's a young 18, so it's not my husband. But he had a problem with connection. I don't know why.
Okay, so welcome, Francesco. Welcome to everybody. I hope the technical problems will be resolved soon. Okay, finally, Emanuele. You are muted.
Hear me? Okay. I'm Emanuele from Rome, the group of Roma 2, the second group of Rome. I think we can start. Okay. Can you hear me clearly? First of all, I apologize for my English that is not so good, so I will try to explain you something, but if it's not clear, stop me and ask me to repeat or to explain better. Okay, I start sharing the screen. Okay. Can you see my screen now? Okay. So today we will follow a small path around the idea of violence connected with architecture and religion. And it's something quite difficult because, you know, the idea of violence is something that is normally dynamical, not static, as usually architecture is. So, well, let's start. To speak about architecture, usually it's more to speak about protection more than violence or anything dynamic. I show you a picture from the 21st edition of De Architectura of Vitruvius. It was a famous architect, but also an engineer and a man that wrote many books about architecture, 10 books about architecture during the 1st century before Christ. And it's quite interesting because it's the only essay about architecture of the ancient times that we still preserved. So the theories of Vitruvius have been like a point of view that was shared and studied for many centuries during the ages. And it's quite interesting to read about his idea of the origin of architecture. Well, in his books, he described the beginning of the architecture as something that started after the first gathering of people around a fireplace, a huge fire. Probably people living more or less like animals found this fire after a storm or something like this, and discovering that it was pleasant, not only dangerous, but also pleasant, they started gathering together around it, and they started also probably calling other people to show this strange event, this strange element. And sitting around it, probably, according to Vitruvius, there was also the beginning of the language, to share their sensations, their feelings about this new experience, and to be able to show also this new discovery to other people. The real beginning of the architecture, according to Vitruvius, is exactly at this point, when they started looking for a way to protect the fire and the people around the fire. So, well, we cannot divide clearly the idea of architecture from the idea of protection. In Vitruvius' theories, but it's something that is shared also today, architecture theoretically cannot hurt, cannot be violent against something, at least from a physical point of view, from a very basic point of view. Well, how could architecture express violence? Principally, breaking rules, destroying what is considered as a basic rule of the human beings. So actually making feel you uncomfortable inside a place, around a place, so giving you bad feelings somehow. This is an example of an architecture that tries to do exactly this. This is a small house, a garden folly, so a strange building built in a park of a noble family in Bomarzo, close to Rome, of the Orsini family. So just a joke, a folly, but it's interesting because inside this place, the so-called leaning house, it's almost impossible to stay in balance, to feel comfortable, because of the walls, because of everything that is exactly as usual, but just a bit in a strange way, not exactly planar, not exactly orthogonal. So at the beginning it's quite funny, but after a few minutes you feel very uncomfortable inside this place. So the first way to express violence is the idea of instability. Another way, completely different, is the idea of a fragmentary shape of something destroyed, scrappy, fragmentary, as I said. This is the Jewish Museum in Berlin, made by Daniel Libeskind in 2001. And it's, well, also quite interesting to see the difference between the old building and the new building made by Libeskind. Expressed exactly with the shape, this idea of fragmentary, not only shape, but also soul, that is connected with the Jewish experience of the Holocaust. And, well, looking at some pictures of the inside, you can see strange spaces with sharp corners, with a strange use of the light, and no respect of the human proportions between, I don't know, the floors and the dimension of people and the eye of the places, of the rooms, of the corridors. So everything is thought to be like a symbol of the violence, the Jewish, how can I say? It's like to represent exactly architectonically the bad feelings of the Jewish during the Holocaust. So going deep with a staircase in an unknown place, something that is symbol of the dead, or also going in a corridor between two high concrete walls that represent the history, the place, the situation that is like stretching you and closing you in a terrible place, uncomfortable place. You feel the danger of the situation, but you cannot go out, you cannot find the exit. Well, this kind of architecture is very close to the contemporary art. It's more an artistical performance than just a building. But in a different way, the idea of violence is expressed in architecture through the centuries, through the history, in a symbolic way, not just with the shapes, but also with proportions, as we said, with position of the buildings. To express what? Actually, well, architecture is always also a symbol of the power. And it's very easy with the shape of a building, like in this case, a castle, a medieval castle in Scotland, to represent exactly the idea of the ownership of a land. So a count or a earl or a viscount in England or in Scotland during the 13th, 14th, 15th century built something like this just to show to the people around that that was the land of his family, his own land. And it's like to say, I am here, you can do what you want, but this place is mine. It's like to underline the possession of this place. Also, this somehow it's a kind of a violence. So a symbol of the power that is often expressed with also the shapes and the distance between the building and the other buildings. This is a picture of the walls of the Ark of Bukhara in Uzbekistan. It's an ancient town with, not exactly at the middle, a big fortress, the so-called Ark, used since 5th century, but remodeled and restored and modified till 200 years ago. Today it's just a museum. But it's very interesting to see the difference between the scale of the building, these walls, with the scale of the human beings. You see clearly that it's like to be in front of something built by a giant or a monster or something that is not human. And this idea of distance is clear also from the position. You see here the old town of Bukhara and the big wide empty space between the fortress, the ark, and the houses, the closest houses here all around. And it's like to say, I will protect myself. I will be here as a symbol of the power. This was also the house of the rulers of the city. Not a religious place, not like a sanctuary, but just the place of the power that is clearly separated from the rest of the city. And this is something that is this idea spread all around the world. It's not something that is just of the European communities, European cultures, or Mediterranean cultures. It's something that is exactly the same worldwide. And something similar is expressed also in a more subtle way in this building. This is Palazzo Farnese in Caprarola, another small town close to Rome. And it's quite interesting because it's exactly the expression made with architecture of the idea of the man of the Renaissance, the man that is the center of the world. Well, you can see here, first of all, the shape that is like a fortress, while this building is a villa. It's not a castle or a place to stay during sieges or battles, but just a villa, a pleasure place. Built with this shape just to say our family is like a fortress. We are like the owners of this land, and we can also, I will show you the plan of the town. We can also define your way, your living spaces. You can see here this part of the town that is the original part of the city, the medieval part of the town. It was just cut in the middle with this street in order to provide a huge monumental entrance to the building of the villa of the Palazzo Farnese. So the man with his power can like design the land, the nature. You can see the gardens here, and the design of the land continues along the mountains all around the building, but also the way of living, the life of the people living around. And it's interesting also to see that this villa was the villa of a cardinal, actually. So a different kind of violence that is made by showing to the people the difference of social classes, of power, of money, the huge distance between being a prince, member of a noble family, nephew of the Pope, and being just a common person living in a small house that is almost impossible to recognize. Well, these were some examples of how architecture can express the idea of violence, or can symbolize the idea of violence and power against some other people. But we started saying that architecture normally is connected directly with the idea of protection, of keeping something safe, of just protect a place that is significant for its content, for its location, for many reasons. And well, this is something that is strictly connected also with religion, because we can say that the beginning of the religious buildings, the beginning of the idea of temple, something connected exactly with the idea of protection. Well, normally in the culture of the Mediterranean, but also in Asia, in Africa, we see that a sacred place is considered mostly an epiphanic place. So the place of the manifestation of God or a divinity, of something so supernatural. So an epiphanic place, that is something like the burning bush for Moses. You remember the Exodus, where, well, Moses heard the voice of God from the burning bush, and God said him, so take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. So where God put his hand, where God shows us his presence, is something sacred, and it's something that has to be protected. Well, the idea of the manifestation of a God in the nature is something that is very common also in the classical culture. For example, during the Greek and Roman ages, there were many springs or woods considered sacred because the house of a nymph or a small god or something like this. But this behavior is something that is very ancient. You have here an example of the 13th century before Christ. That is very interesting because it's just a spring, actually, considered sacred. And well, this is in Sardinia, su Tempiesu. They started going there like a place of pilgrimage, and they started also building first a small wall, and then the small hut, the small building exactly over the spring to protect it. But from what? It's not a place where you can consider rich or important, so you should attack it or take advantage of it. It's just a place that expresses the presence of something that is not completely comprehensible. But well, they started building. They started also giving a shape, a regular shape to the spring. You can see here on the left. And just a question. Okay, you see also. Oh, now it's better, I think. So they started building all this structure to make this place more important, more sumptuous, more monumental, in order to give honor to the divinity that shown his or her power in this place. This is a picture of the end of the 19th century, but it expresses exactly this concept of a sacred wall, a temenos, that was built all around a holy tree, in this case. Temenos in Greek is exactly the precinct, the sacred wall built around a sacred place. That is something that is not exactly made to protect the place inside, but not only. Well, there are two kinds of protection in these kind of structures. Well, first of all, is a place of manifestation of God. So a place where the human beings can face something that is stronger than every human that they can see, and is stronger, it's mysterious, is something incomprehensible. So it's something dangerous, something that could kill you, could destroy you. So the first things to do is to define exactly the perimeter, the borders of this place, to say, okay, we have an outside and an inside of this place. You have to leave an access to the place in order to be able to enter inside. And this is connected also with the idea of, that is common in agriculture, the power that is something given to the people that are able to enter in a sacred place. The priests also in the Temple of Jerusalem were structured more or less around this idea, this concept. And well, it's a place that is made, it's a wall that is made to protect the inner part from the outside, so to avoid people entering inside, but also to avoid the strong power that is inside to kill you that are outside. So this is exactly why in many cultures are so common the practical of the sacrifices. To sacrifice, to make something sacred, to offer it to God, is like to say, I offer you something in order to receive this strength, the force to enter and to face directly with God, with the divinity that is inside. You know that in the Temple of Jerusalem, only the big, the Sommo Sacerdote, the high priest, was allowed to enter in the Sancta Sanctorum, in the inner chamber of the temple, only once a year, and after having made a lot of sacrifices and ritual baths, and after being completely purified. So it's like to say, I need all my forces, I need to receive the forces from the bull I had to kill, or the animals I had to burn for the sacrifice, in order to be strong enough to enter in the place, in the sacred place. And the idea of temenos, of the sacred wall, and of an epiphanic place, is something that is clear also in the culture, the Greek classical culture. This is the Erechtheion, one of the most beautiful buildings of the Acropolis of Athens. This is a building of the 5th century before Christ, and it's quite interesting because it's this place and not the Parthenon, the most famous temple of Athens, protecting the most sacred places of Greece and of the city. This sanctuary, well, it looks like many buildings put together, is made in this way just because they tried with a unique building to cover and to protect many places that were connected with the legendary war and contest between Athena and Poseidon, in order to have to give the name to the city and to become the protecting god of the city of Athens. And you can see in the plan the tree here, that is the tree given by Athena, by the goddess, to the city. Number 2, it's a salt spring, a saltwater spring that was sacred to Poseidon. And inside, number 2 probably, there was the statue of Athena that was the winner of this contest. And 6 was another small sanctuary of Erechthonius that gave the name to the whole building, the Erechtheion. That was an ancient god before the cult, the beginning of the cult of Athena and Poseidon. That was that was, well, they believed that he lived in a small cave just behind the building, just under the building here. So they wanted also to preserve this ancient cult, to maintain and to complete the history of the religion, of the cult in Athens, and to put everything under a huge shrine, a huge sanctuary. So in a period where when the classical philosophy was already completely developed, and a period when the democracy was at its highest point, but a period when they decided still to maintain this idea of temenos, of sacred prescient, of sacred walls, around places that are actually exactly like the prehistoric spring we saw before. And looking at the plan of the whole Acropolis of Athens, we see that it's a huge white temenos. You can clearly see the walls all around the arc, this hill of the Acropolis, with a monumental entrance. And it's like to say, this place belongs to the gods. So it's not a place where you can build an house, a palace, or something like this. It's just a place for religion, for cults. And it's a place that has to be fortified. You see from an aerial picture like this, the big walls built all around the hill that were useful, yes, but not so necessary, because you see the hill is quite high and there were rocks all around it. So it was not a place like a fortress to stay inside and to defend people or something from an attack. It was just a way, building these walls, to say that this is the most sacred place we have, and we have to protect it in the better way. Same idea is, it's possible to see the same idea in many other temples and sanctuaries in ancient Greece. Like this, this is Delphi, the sanctuary of Apollo, the shrine of Apollo, the central temple, the theater, but many small other temples and thesauroi, small buildings made to put inside offerings given by the different cities of Greece. Everything inside a huge wall, that to define exactly the perimeter of the sacred space, of the sacred place of the city. I show you another temple that is quite interesting because it's a late temple. We are in 4th century before Christ, not in Greece but in Turkey, in Didyma. This temple was a temple dedicated to Apollo, and it's interesting because it's one of the biggest temple of the antiquity. But it's very interesting also for the inner part, the naos, that is not exactly as usual just a big room with a huge sculpture representing the god or the goddess of the temple, but it's an open courtyard. This is these are the small remains of the temple, but it's clear the shape of the courtyard of the naos, with in the middle a small temple. Inside there was this statue of Apollo, a wooden sculpture, very ancient. That was the speaking statue. This was the temple where there was also an oracle. But in the courtyard there was like a small garden. So somehow inside a huge building like this, they tried to put again the idea of a sacred wood, the nature as the place of manifestation of God, like in the archaic period. And the idea of garden, of a sacred wood, a heavenly garden, is something that is quite common in the Mediterranean, and it's something that is also connected with the idea of heaven. We have many examples of Islamic gardens like this. This is in Iran. Are made exactly with this shape, a regular shape with a garden, a formal garden with trees, with water, with huge walls all around, and usually set in the desert. It's very important, the symbolism of a place like this. It's like to represent the heaven, so a perfect garden, in a place like, in a desertic place, the water also is connected with the idea of heaven, and with walls that are like the protection of this inner secret world from the outside, and but also the borders, they define exactly the shape, the dimension of this small paradise, this small heaven. Many of these gardens are actually funerary gardens, built to all around maybe an important tomb, a mausoleum, a monument of a king or something like this, or a prince that died. And this connection, the tomb with the garden, something also that underlines the idea of the garden as the heaven, with the perspective of the afterlife, of course. And it's interesting to see how deep this idea of the garden, of the square garden, of the water defining and dividing of the walls all around it, is set in the mind of the Mediterranean people. This is a carpet of the 17th century, and it follows exactly the scheme of a garden, of a Persian garden. You see the central basin, 4 rivers on the 4 sides, and the trees, the gardens, the walls represented all around. Carpet in the culture of the Middle East is always like a small temenos. It's a way to define a space, define a place, and it's also a way to define your place of worship, your sitting place during the prayer. If you think to the, for example, to the Muslim way of prayer, often on a prayer rug, a prayer carpet, made exactly in this way, or representing a niche or an arch in the direction of La Mecca. This concept of a garden or something precious, something that represents the heaven, hidden between the walls, between inside a fortress, is something that is quite common also in the early Christian architecture. If you think to the idea of the heavenly Jerusalem as a representation of the Christian community, and to the fact that the symbolism of every church in the world is strictly connected with the idea of the heavenly Jerusalem, with the community of the last days, with the community of described in the book of Revelations, in the Apocalypse. Well, you will understand exactly why they started building places like this, a monastery in the Sinai in Egypt, just within walls, within huge walls like a fortress with gardens inside, and at the center a church. In this case, St. Catherine's Monastery is also one of the most ancient monasteries in the world. It was built by the Emperor Justinianus to protect and to honorate the place traditionally recognized as the place of the episode of the burning bush of Moses. So a place that during the centuries was like a coffin of treasures and wonderful things, like this famous icon. This is one of the most ancient icons representing the Pantocrator, Christ as the ruler of the universe, and of the 6th century, so exactly of the period of the building of the monastery. And it's interesting that the monastery is still preserved exactly as it was built, or better, well, it was enlarged and few parts were added and modified, but the central part is still the original one. And it resisted also to many attacks from Muslims during the Second World War, just because this was a place so ancient, so considered so venerable, so important, that they respected it. They never destroyed it, also when it was conquered by Muslims. This idea of heaven, holy Jerusalem that is protected, built and protected with walls, with fortifications, is something that is quite common also during the Middle Ages in many monasteries. This is the Sagra of San Michele in Turin, that it's quite interesting because it's like to build the house of the Lord, that actually is the house of the Christian community, on the top of a mountain. But they didn't need to build a place like this. It's the most important reason to choose a place like this is the symbolism, because it's like to represent the way, the staircase connecting the world with the Lord. And the church that is here between the earth and the heaven is exactly the idea of the connection between the two worlds. So somehow it represents the idea of a staircase to heaven, but from outside is exactly a fortress. More or less the same idea is behind the building of the Abbey of Monte Cassino. This was the most important Benedictine monastery abbey, founded directly by Saint Benedict in the 6th century. And well, it's built on the top of a hill, like a fortress. The hill is completely empty. There is just this monastery on the top. And it's like to say, yeah, we are walking, going as close as possible to the sky, going on, trying to be close, to stay close to God. And this is the main entrance, the ancient door of the abbey, and it's interesting the text over the word over the door, pax, peace, that is a bit ambiguous. It means peace to you that are coming here, but also you are entering, is exactly over the door. You are entering in a place of peace, in a earthly version of the heavenly Jerusalem, of the Holy Jerusalem. And the building is very beautiful. This is the biggest cloister of the abbey, but there are 4 big cloisters and many other small courtyards and gardens. And it's a bit like to be in Eden. But it's also a place strictly connected with violence. So this is an image of the Abbey after the Second World War in 1944. It was completely destroyed by the Allied bombing during the February of 1944. Many works of art, the huge library that was inside, were saved, bringing everything in the Vatican and something in Naples. But the building was completely destroyed. And when they, after the war, decided to rebuild it completely, exactly as it was before, they decided just to leave some parts of the building, like the ceilings in the church, inside the church, completely empty. Leaving these spaces blank, they tried to underline also the memory as an important element of the architecture. This was a place that was actually destroyed, so they couldn't build it exactly as it was before. They had to underline the fact that they received, well, they saved somehow this place, rebuilding it, but it was actually destroyed, damaged by the violence of the war. So we are used to see these kind of ceilings completely covered with frescoes, and it's quite interesting to see how expressive can be also the idea of leaving them black, completely white, completely empty. The idea of memory is something that is strictly connected with architecture because, of course, architecture is something that lasts for a long time. So every building can be like a book where you can find many layers of history and also histories of violence. This is a picture of the Via Crucis of the Good Friday that here in Rome usually is made inside the Colosseum. That is also a way to commemorate the use of this building and to stay close to commemorate all the martyrs, all the people that died in a place like this. It's a big monument, but it's also a place of violence. And just celebrating a liturgy inside, just commemorating the people, praying for them. And well, we are almost at the end of our small speech. This is for Sant'Angelo in Virgo, Vittoriosa in Malta. Well, this should have been the location of our meeting actually, but well, it's impossible now, but I suggest you to, when it will be possible to go to Malta, to visit this place because it's really extraordinary. It's very beautiful. And it's quite interesting, the fact that it's like it summarized all these themes we studied a bit in these few minutes, because it's like a fortress on the sea, protecting somehow the great harbor of Malta, facing La Valletta, the capital city. But it's it's of course a place of violence because it's the main place of the great siege of 1565, when the Ottomans tried to invade the island of Malta, and the Knights of St. John resisted exactly at the end, exactly inside the Fort Sant'Angelo. And well, so a place that was the theater of many violence that expresses violence with this architecture, with these huge walls, a monumental building. As I said before, the difference of scale between human beings and these walls is exactly made to underline the power, the strength of the order of St. John in this case, that built this place, but with a small garden, a small heaven in the middle, the earth of this place, with a church, the Church of St. Anne, a small chapel built probably during the Middle Ages, but preserved and restored by the Knights of St. John during the 15th century and 16th century. This is an image of the inside, of the interior of the chapel. And it's very beautiful to think that during the war, this was the real center of the siege. This was the place where the Knights of St. John asked for help to God, to the Virgin, to St. Anne, asked for protection, but at the same time, it's also the place that they tried to protect somehow their God, no? The expression of the Christian faith, the expression of their believing in God. So it's like to see here how protecting something, it's also allowing this thing to protect us. It's like to make a prayer for protection while protecting it. And well, I finished my I finished my small formation. I don't know if you have questions or if something was not clear. Feel free to ask. And I would like also to have feedback. If you have an example of an architecture, a building that can express violence, an idea of violence that is like the buildings we saw, or also something completely different. If you want to share with us, with everyone. Or also just a stupid question.
I want to answer you about the passage of the garden as a heaven, and then you said, when speaking about the carpet, you said also something about hell. In that moment, we lose connection, so we haven't heard that passage.
About the heaven. No. I was speaking about the heaven, just the heaven. Not
okay. So we are the. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question. And how would you enumerate the characteristic of violence in architecture? You went through a lot of cases and a lot of studies, and I tried, but could you just enumerate the characteristics, in a kind of for you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I think we can divide the expression of violence directly from physical point of view. So the violence expressed with building something with a strange shape, with a violent shape, let's say, from something that is just expressing violence with this symbolical meaning, with this position, with these dimensions, with these proportions. So this is the first difference, the first two kinds of expressions of violence you can find in architecture. And well, I think that expressing violence, more or less, we are always around these two themes. But another important element is exactly the memory. The idea of rethinking to something that happened in a place. So a place that is not violent at all as an architecture can become a place that is strictly connected with violence just for the history of the building, like in Monte Cassino, if you want. So maybe with these three elements, often you will find not just one of these, but more or less the three of them together, but with different, well, expressed in different ways. If you think to the Museum of the Shoah of Libeskin, you can see that, yes, the shape is something that wants to express violence, but is strictly connected with memory. It's not the memory of something that happened exactly in that place, but it's the memory of something that happened in the whole country and in the whole world. So yes, not just a way to express violence, but always more than one. But more or less, I think that in these three ways, it's possible to find the idea of violence in the architecture. Of course, this is my opinion. I would like to also to hear something from you. If you have different ideas or if you have some other examples.
Hi, Emanuele. I was thinking about the Berlin Wall, which also kind of represents violence, right? Because it divides two parts. Mm-hmm. Well, the west and the east part of Berlin. People got separated by that. So it, you know, on a human level, a very important one, on a human and psychological level, I guess. So it was kind of the connection I made as well, that it's symbolic, but it's also very physical.
Yep.
And it's also connected to history. So it also kind of all three elements come together in that way. Yeah, just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry for my English. If you want, I speak in Italian. But I liked when the last image in La Valletta, when you said that that place were place to protect and where God protected us. I think it's very, very important today.
Thank you. Yeah, actually we are in a very strange situation because today is like to be protected from something that is not visible, and we are protected with by our walls, our houses, our buildings. So it's yeah, we are like in a siege now. We are trying to protect ourselves inside, but also we are, I think, in a situation like this that is also spiritually and psychologically speaking quite dangerous. We have to find also something that is protecting us, to ask for protection. Thank you.
Maybe I can share another thought that I had. I was just thinking about how we use architecture and language, right? We say you build up a wall, right, to protect yourself. So it's the way you come across. Or we also use expressions like I'm running against the wall, like I can't go through, like I'm not reaching the person. So we kind of use physical terminology to express kind of a boundary. And actually it's really hurtful to run against the wall, right? So it's expressing kind of the violence between behind it, I guess. So I was reflecting a bit on that, and my question to you would be, I guess in current kind of architecture, what do you feel is the most common kind of way to express violence at the just in common architecture ways?
Well, it's quite difficult to answer because actually architecture doesn't express anything. It's just something that is completely static. Right. So when we say it expresses violence or it expresses something different, actually we are speaking about our behavior in front of that building. So well, the good architect is actually the one that is able to provocate something inside the people that are living or just seeing that building. But I think that many things in our common architecture could be used as a symbol of violence. Also the simple symbol of the wall, as you said. Actually, also the garden wall of our house, for example, the small wall that is dividing our garden from the outside, from the street, or something like this, could be a symbol of violence, because what you are doing is actually you are avoiding any kind of contact, any kind of you are avoiding to see and to get in touch with the other, and this could be an expression of violence. And well, if you think the same idea of a city actually could be seen as an expression of violence, because it's a place where it's a place where you can find everything. It's easier to live in a city than in the countryside, in the middle of nothing. But you are also completely surrounded by other people trying to live in their way. You are trying to live in your way, and you could find a place like the city, a place extremely violent, psychologically speaking, because it's where you cannot find the humanity of the human beings. So this is quite complicated, but actually it's an act of violence. It's a place where you see many people, and you cannot say, okay, I know him, I know who he is, and I'm a friend of him, or also I'm his enemy. But you are just surrounded by many people that for you could represent just a huge lack of contact, of relationship. So also just a building, imagine a block building with many houses, small houses, exactly like the other. That could be a normal building, something that is a common architecture that can express exactly the idea of violence from this point of view.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, everybody. Hello, I hope now it will work better. I am double connected through cell phone and laptop. Thank you, Emanuele, for the fantastic presentation and thoughts. When I was listening now to these questions, I also remembered about some topic that was quite hot in the last years. So maybe I can show some pictures about violence in public space design, let's say. So I will share here my screen just shortly. So you can see here, do you see my screen?
Yes.
So yeah, this is protection against the birds, but in London, it was especially hot debate about design of public spaces against homeless people, let's say, no? So there were some, just a second. So here we can see this bench that is on the first look very nicely designed, but actually its form prevents from sleeping on these benches. And there are other examples of this kind of design as well, or even more drastic ones, let's say. So this could also be thought about this, that you do not want some people in your vicinity of your building. So it's excluding some part of population, let's say, with this design in a way that is violent. Yeah. So I just shortly wanted to add maybe something to this. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to share one last thing that came to mind as well. When we had the huge migrant wave, there was, in the last month or years, it was, church as an architecture was actually there to protect from violence as well. A lot of churches, I think as well in Italy, had migrants entering church and sleeping in the churches to make sure they can't be sent back to their home country, where there is a lot of violence, where they wouldn't be safe. So a religious place where, you know, that actually then acts as a protection from violence could be one of the examples, kind of how you know, that's used. It's still used, because I'm just trying to think about how do we use it today, architecture as, you know, for protection from violence or to express violence. What meaning do we give? And I think that's a really beautiful one.
Thank you.
If anyone wants to ask other things. So personally, I don't have a question. Only I want to share you that I really like the story of the Abbey of Monte Cassino, and especially the fact that the reconstruction was different from the previous one. And I really like that architecture can be a testimony of something, and that can help you to remember about your history and our history, that is a history of violence. So how architecture can be really a way to remember the others and to make a testimony. So just a little reflection about this.
I have a question. In the first picture of your presentation, Emanuele,
yeah,
I think the origin of the architecture, you mentioned that first you always have the protection before architecture, or something like that, the way around. Related to that picture, what were they protecting from?
Well, the picture was about the fact that the first small group of people getting together around the fireplace, a small fire, wanted to cover themselves from the rains, from the wind, from the nature, and also to protect the fire, actually. So the idea was to establish a relationship between themselves, the nature, and the other people, and to protect this new relationship with the other people, actually. I think more or less was this the aim of the story. Of course, it's like a child story. It's just a way used by Vitruvius to show how the human being is strictly connected with the idea of relationship with the others, so the language, and the idea of protection, actually, so the architecture.
Thank you.
Maybe we can leave other 2 or 3 minutes if we have other questions. What do you think, Emanuele? And then we can
and we can
close the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just have another question to you, Emanuele. I was wondering if you could maybe just tell us a little bit more about you and your background and why this topic is so important to you, and yeah, why you kind of chose this topic.
Well, actually, I'm an architect, and I studied also. I have a PhD in history of architecture. Well, I studied for 3 years, mainly the sacred architecture, so the rebuilding of the ancient Roman churches during the 16th and 17th centuries, the Baroque period, and in particular the idea of the martyrdom and the monuments built to the martyrs inside the Roman churches exactly during the Baroque period. So not so strictly connected with this matter, actually, but the idea was at the beginning to do this meeting in the Fort Sant'Angelo, in the upper Fort Sant'Angelo. So, well, I wanted to show you exactly these themes. Well, of course, in a different way, because being there, being the place is completely different. And because, you know, when you approach a matter like this, it's quite important also to explore the architecture. So I have shown you just pictures, but isn't absolutely nothing compared with being inside an architecture. Because when you see a place, when you visit a an architecture, you don't see just the building, just the shape, just the space, but your feelings are strongly influenced by smells, light, the sounds, the texture of materials, also the way your way of walking along a building, inside a corridor, inside a space, the dimension that is very important. I often spoke about the question of the proportions between human being and architecture. It's a very important question. It's a very important matter. It changes completely the way you live a space. There are some examples of spaces that are exactly the same. There is, for example, a building, a small church in Rome, San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane, that is quite beautiful and very small. It's maybe one of the most beautiful Baroque churches in Rome. And it was built by Francesco Borromini, that made also another version of the same church, or at least it was made by other architects, but with the same design, with the same plan, with the same architecture, but bigger in Gubbio. To visit the two places, it's an experience that is completely different. Places that are made with the same plan, so the same architecture, just with a different of scale. So it's, I think that to be inside the architecture, it's something that involves you directly, physically. So yeah, I tried just to show you to give you some points to explore a bit this idea of violence connected with architecture. But yeah, I suggest you really to visit the places and to see all these things. But actually, yeah, it's not exactly my field, let's say, but I'm very interested in the use, the symbolism connected with architecture, the use of all the architectonical language to express something specific. So I found quite interesting the idea of exploring a bit the concept of violence connected with architecture through the ages, in many different ways, but also with, at the very end, the same basic themes.
Thank you, Emanuele. You definitely did that very beautifully. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you to you.
Now I'm thinking to an expression, an Italian expression that he used when I want to eliminate some people from my life. We say to build a wall between me and the person who I want to left my life. I want he to live my life. And I thought to this that it's also a sign of violence, metaphorical violence, but linked to the walls.
Thank you. Actually, we use many expressions, linguistical expressions connected with architecture. Also, for example, to cutting the bridge, exactly because of the strength of an architectonical image of the yeah, the force of the expression of an architecture of a building that can have on our mind, on our behavior, on our
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, maybe we can close the meeting. Okay. So thank you, Emanuele, for this beautiful formation. Thank you for your participation. And okay, the next appointment is in 1 hour with the group sharing groups, and then with the prayer at 8:00 p.m. Okay, so thank you,
everyone.
And bye. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.